Hi everyone, this is Pru and welcome to the Engineering Success Podcast. Today we are talking Fintech engineering with Varun. Varun is a software engineering leader at Tata Digital and comes with a strong background in finance and tech. We discuss the importance of domain expertise as you progress in your career, the impact of AI, and tips for leading tech teams. Let's dive in. Hey Varun, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hey, Prithvi, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
So, Varun, you've been working in fintech 14 years. So, how do you think about how has it helped you by staying in one domain for such a long time as an
Sure,
engineering leader?
sure. I think initially the fact that I was working in financial markets, the combination of finance and technology, two of the most complex, probably, or unknown things out there brought together really intrigued me. It is an interesting domain. So initially it was all about building trading platforms, building risk analytics platforms for buy side firms, some of the largest buy side firms in the world. But as my career moved on, there were a couple of things which I realized. I like the domain and I like to, and my understanding, which got built as I got along, helped me become a better programmer. See, at the end of the day, the tech is as good as the business value it solves, right? So if you're a good programmer, you can become a better programmer if you understand what is the output you're giving to the business and what you're adding to the business.
Right.
There came a point when I was probably getting into the people role or an architecture role where this became an important piece, where some of the opportunities I got, some of the projects I started handling were the fact that not only I had the technology background, but I also had the domain knowledge, and it actually quite helped me to A, talk to the business, B, provide something which is of high quality, C, as a leader, to provide a view to my team as well, to the younger developers, that whatever they are actually delivering to the system, right? How will it impact? I have a story around it. So first time I was building a trading platform for one of the largest firms or buy side firms in the world. The first time I actually went to the trading floor and looked at some trader using my own built system, that was one of the best experiences I had, and give me a confidence that yes, it is something being used, it's something being appreciated. What my personal experience has been that the knowledge of domain along with technology, upskilling technology along with upskilling the domain has been a really boost for my career in terms of progression, to an extent that out of the 14 years of my experience, probably 10, 12 years, I have been in financial markets and still am. Yeah, absolutely. After a certain point, after a certain hierarchy level, I would really suggest everybody out there to start looking at the domain side of things, for them to get the seat on the table, to be interacting with business folks, which is only going to make you a better developer.
I think that also partially answers my next question, but would love to see if you would like to add to that. Is how do you think about engineering leaders managing the relationship with business teams, right? And how do you think about making it more effective? I think you're coming from the angle of having more domain knowledge absolutely helps, but are there other things that you think about there?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, tech is as good as the business problem it is solving. So my role as a CTO, so I was a CTO at one of the early stage startups earlier. So one of my core jobs, or one of my core responsibilities there, was not only managing downwards but also managing sideways. And what does that mean? Basically, one of the things I really worked on is to make my peers, the other CXOs, appreciate what the technology team goes through and understand what it end up adding the value to the company revenue in general, right? Not only that, I somehow feel that engineering leaders specifically wear two hats. One is, and good engineering leaders wear actually three hats. One is the people manager hat, which is again really important. The second is the technology or the architect hat, which is how to take decisions on the vision, look at the system and understand the tech debt and how do you work on it, and make the senior leadership understand that tech debt is a reality and how do you can solve for it. And the third bit is the product angle, the actual business angle, where you dumb down the technology to, nothing against the technology folks, right? But dumb down the technology for them to understand what goes into building great systems, great distributed systems, and also sitting with them. A lot of my role or my part of my role was sitting with the system, with the people who were using these systems. So there were two aspects. One is the retail side of things, the consumer side of things, but you also build a lot of internal systems, right, to improve operational efficiencies. To as a startup scales, right, you can't be doing everything on Excel sheets. You have to build internal systems. So one of my responsibilities was just to be a fly on the wall, to sit with people, understand the work flows which they were working on day in, day out, and then suggest them, how about you do this, how about you do that. Nothing fancy, little smaller automations stuff, something like a Excel reading into an internal tool. So nothing fancy, but the idea is to act as a bridge between the senior leadership and the technology team. It becomes really important. To an extent, I would say that the CTO role, right, is an executive role as much as it is a technical role. And what do I mean by that? You need to take your peers along. You need to make them understand if something is taking some time. Why is it taking so long? A system can be made in 2 days and can also take 1 month. It is the quality, it is the complexity, it is the scalability, the other abilities which end up coming into the picture, where when you're taking some time to build a system, that system can last much longer than something which was built within 2 days. I would add to that, one of the really important things which helped me in this journey was getting the right metrics to present to the senior leadership. And Dev Dynamics was, as we had conversation. So I was one of the early adopters of Dev Dynamics. So one of the things I used Dora metrics, or the metrics which were coming out of Dev Dynamics, were to prioritize and to consolidate and aggregate metrics to present to the senior leadership. The idea is to not pinpoint any specific person. Idea is to make the senior leadership, again, I'm reiterating, appreciate what is going into the system, why it is taking, what it is taking, how quality and the time are a trade-off, to show it very clearly day in, day out as a metric is really important, right? So that is where engineering leaders need to be part of the system and get a seat at the table of the senior leadership, and make them appreciate, basically, and become the part of the system output.
Oh, that's great. And we talk to a lot of engineering leaders who are also trying to answer the question as to how does engineering get a seat at the table, right? And how does it get a voice in the boardroom? And I think you have addressed some part of that. I wanted to shift the focus a little bit about, I think you mentioned the three hats that an engineering leader has to wear. And that was definitely the product and business know-how, then tech architecture, and third is the people manager. So because people management or building teams can be such a big part of it, I wanted to understand how you think about building great engineering teams.
Sure. I think there are two aspects to it. One of the things which I feel we get into a lot as engineering leaders are metrics, the velocities, the sprint burn downs of the world. I'm not saying they're not useful metrics, but I think there is a human psychology behind it. One of the tricks of building great technology teams, in my opinion, is to learn the art of having one-to-ones. And to have one-to-ones, you need to have data backing it. So I think everybody in the system or everybody in your team has a very different baseline, has a very different mindset, right? So you need to understand what the mindset of that particular person is. And that's where the people managers come in. You cannot have one blanket, say, set of OKRs for everybody, right? You cannot have one blanket way of or measurement yardstick, right? You need to understand what drives people, right? I'll give you an example. For some people, money is a big driver. I don't know why we, as in India, don't like to talk about money a lot or take it as a wrong thing. At the end of the day, a lot of people have money as a driver, especially the younger folks, the folks who are starting in the industry. Whereas some of the people have the work or the next level, right, responsibility as main drivers. In fact, there are some folks who are very new to industry and their main driver is flexing in front of their friends, right? So I know a few people straight out of college, they used to love bragging that they were working on the Flutters and the Kotlins and the React, Next.js of the world. And they were working one day on the cloud side of things, second on the backend side of things. So I think coming back to the original point, it's very important to understand what drives people in your team, right? Secondly, I think one great thing which I learned from my mentors and my managers along the way, and by the way, I'm really lucky to have great mentors. And one of the reasons probably I'm having this conversation, I'm able to have these conversations is because what I've learned from them. So building great teams, I think one of the important things is to provide psychological safety. And what do I mean by that? Letting people challenge stuff, having a culture of not fighting, not finger pointing, but having a culture of debating and challenging the status quo. I really don't like, or I really hate the hippo culture, which is basically for people who don't know, the highest paid person opinion. So basically, the person who's highly paid or the highest paid in the room comes in, gives a solution, and it's done, right? I would rather say it's the other way around, where, see, at the end of the day, my role was such, and probably for past 5 years my roles have been such that I haven't been able to code to an extent I would love to, right? So the folks are coding much more on day-to-day basis than I do. So clearly they know something and they are close to the code base than I am, right? Same goes with somebody who's doing the quality control. Same goes with somebody who's doing product. So having a voice, or for some such people having a voice, is clearly really important for building great high performing culture. So I think a psychological safety where somebody who's even say 2 years, 3 years of experience comes in, challenges anybody in the system and doesn't feel, oh, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? Did I piss somebody off? I think a culture of that sort is really important. I've tried to do that for my teams. Hopefully I've been able to be successful.
Hey, Varun. Varun, can you?
That is that you give people a platform to speak. You give people.
Varun, actually, give me just sorry to break in. I think you went off for 30 seconds. So if you don't mind, repeat and we'll cut it in edit. The last 30 seconds, the screen froze over for some reason.
Okay. I'll probably. Okay. So
Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. So what I was saying is that I've been lucky enough that to lead a people of 30 folks, and they've been happy enough. They were still there when I was there. And to be honest, the idea is to always provide a platform for folks to speak up, to have fun every day, and specifically people who are working at creating things, right? The developers, the QAs, the product managers, give them time to get into this flow state, which gets talked about a lot. So there is a 2010 study where I think where it came, there was a study which talked about what is a flow state, how does it impact a developer or a QA person. What it says is that if you actually take a developer out of flow state, it takes the developer to 15 minutes to 45 minutes to get back to the flow state.
Right.
So the idea is that you need to have a window for people who are creating stuff, who are doing the work of coding, of testing, of product management, to get into flow state for at least half of their day. So minimizing meetings, acting as the absorbing layer so that they don't get bothered by the tiniest things is really important for engineering leaders and to build the performance culture.
No, that's great, Varun. So one of the things, one-on-ones, right? And like discovering individuals, right? Is there a magic question or is there a trick that you have found to help open up people in one-on-one meetings? Because sometimes these one-on-ones tend to become stagnate a little bit and become a bit templatized in the questions and maybe even in the answers.
I think there are two parts. One is having one-on-ones at a particular frequency, not skipping your one-on-one. So one of the things I think a lot of engineering leaders skip or miss is that the one-on-ones, the cadence of one-on-ones is too far beyond. And probably in a lot of organizations, it's probably a mid-year review and a final year review, which is actually a one-on-one. One of the things I feel that if I am giving a feedback during a mid-year or a final year review, I'm at fault. But during a performance review, a feedback shouldn't come for the first time. A person shouldn't be surprised that they got a feedback for the first time. So I think the idea is to have the one-on-one sessions at a particular cadence, fortnightly, monthly, whatever, depending on how many people reporting to you, whatever suits you. So that's one trick. So even if you don't have any agenda, any template, anything specific to talk about, just have that in a particular cadence. Just don't skip the one-on-one meeting for something or the other, which might be more important. So that's one thing which worked for me a lot. Second is not having a template is really important, right?
Okay.
It's not about uh, having a template. What did you do? How do you feel? It's a more of an informal conversation. But during that informal conversation, understanding what's bothering or what's taking, if somebody is not performing well suddenly, there might be some personal reason why they are not performing well. So trying to understand that is more. Third thing is having a lot of data to back it. So again, I'll probably talk about Dev Dynamics. There are other tools like Linear B and other tools. They clearly call out what are the active days of developers. There might be a developer who might actually get burnout. So understanding so for example, if a developer has a X amount of active days, usually on an average for past 6 months, and suddenly that has gone to say X by 2. Just understand, right? Just don't mention it. Oh, by the way, your productivity has gone down by this much.
Right.
You need to solve for that. Yes, you need to solve for that, but I think there must be some reason, and understanding that is really important. Third thing is that I think, and again, this is something which I've learned from my mentors, is we tend to delay constructive feedback, right? Appreciating is easy. Giving constructive feedback is fairly difficult. And it's a human tendency to avoid that till the end, keep last 5 minutes. Oh, by the way, if you could have done this, it would have been better. Now, constructive feedback also is at two aspects. One is if somebody at the specific role is not doing well. So how do you help them understand what is bothering them? What are the impediments, and try to solve for those? But if somebody is also doing well, you also can have constructive feedback. And why do you want a constructive feedback there? Is to make sure that person is ready to move to their next role. So one thing one of my mentors used to say is, for you to actually move to next role, you need to be performing that responsibility for 6 months earlier. It's not that you become a tech lead and suddenly you do start doing the tech lead activities. So one of the things where one-on-one actually helps is where you identify high performers and tell them that, great, you're doing a great job. You're doing an amazing job. You probably are ready for your next role. How about we start planning for those? And we'd go step by step. And for next 6 months, you start looking into, say, reviewing code a little more and probably looking to code, say, 20% less and looking to mentor somebody a little more, and actually build a clear case for senior leadership to not say no to their promotion, right? Or moving to the next role. So I think one-on-ones are really important in terms of having a clear and a consistent path of somebody's development rather than the medias and the final year, as I mentioned. That is, again, I think final year performance appraisal should be very short, like a 10-minute thing, because everything, right? The feedback has been given. So it should be a fairly quick and a very easy conversation rather than how it is right now. It's usually not an easy conversation for a lot of engineering leaders.
I love it. So there's so many actionable tips, especially the fact that if your final year conversations or final period, like at the 6 months, are much longer than 10 minutes, then you probably have skipped on a lot of one-on-ones, the steps in between. Great stuff. One question, you talked about the importance of mentors. Can you talk a little bit about that? Have you actively sought out mentors? How would you guide people? Because the transition from like in IC track, individual contributor track, to engineering leadership track, right? It's fraught with unknowns and difficulties. So how do you think about like mentors along this path?
Sure. I think I'll be very honest. One of the things which really surprised me is that there are a lot of senior leaders who are ready to mentor, are ready to help. I think it's just that there are a lot of younger folks or folks who are not people manager, don't reach out to them or don't talk to them. And a mentor-mentee relationship doesn't necessarily need to be a formal relationship. In fact, it never is a formal relationship. My suggestion would be seek out opportunities to talk to, have a conversation with these people. Ask a lot of questions. Senior leaders love people who ask a lot of questions. And a lot of times, if you're asking a question in public forum, a senior leader might actually answer there, but also strike up a conversation afterwards. I would say there are a lot of, from when I started to current state, there are a lot of opportunities to make mentors in the industry. To be honest, there are hackathons in your organization. There are a lot of tech related activities which give you an opportunity to work with these mentors, or get exposure to these mentors or these people, leaders, senior leaders, which will basically put the foot on the door. So seek out the opportunities. Your career is your responsibility. So the more you seek out opportunities, the better will it be. To be honest, and that's the organization side of things. Not only that, there are a lot of amazing platforms today. A simple one, which everybody is part of, is LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
I'll give my example. So I used to follow a blog of a person, really senior person, really amazing person, a global CTO of a well-known unicorn startup. Now moved on to one of the biggest OTT platforms in India. So I used to read his blogs, right? I used to love his blogs. Used to follow his thought process a lot. Just went ahead and messaged him one day on LinkedIn that I love your blogs. Would love to pick your brain one day. That guy, within 24 hours, reached out to me, said, "Here is my Calendly. How about we have a conversation?" And that day, and now we generally have conversations, a lot of conversations in general, right?
Right.
Yeah, on a lot of topics, and we basically shared a lot of resumes of a lot of people which we think would be great fit for each other. I think the idea is to reach out and to seek out amazing people. You would be surprised that there are a lot of people, and those people are really helpful, even though they might seem to be one of the busiest people on the planet, but they actually want to help out. To be honest, taking inspiration from this person, I ended up opening my LinkedIn profile, my Calendly link, and I had a lot of conversation with a lot of people, right? So I think for people who are in the senior roles, they need to help out people, and they're ready to help out. But the folks who are moving up the career ladder need to seek out. There are a lot of podcasts like these, right? You need to understand, you need to listen to them, you need to watch them to understand the psyche of people. How do they think about it? How did they reach to a certain level in their careers? What was the thought process? I think that also helps a lot. And more often than not, you can reach out to these people without even thinking.
Varun, this is great stuff. Like, the picture I'm getting is you've really been very intentional about your career, and that's amazing to see. And like, your career is basically your responsibility. That's great to hear. I think final two questions. I think one of them you partially addressed earlier, but how do you, can you talk a little bit about your last role transition and what surprised you about it, or what do you wish you knew? Either way, you can answer
Sure.
that.
So the biggest transition for me has been moving from a VP role, which was a senior manager role at one of the largest, actually the largest asset manager in the world, to an early stage startup and acting as a CTO. I think there were two things. One is that the role where in a large organization, right, you don't need to worry about a lot of things. A lot of things come to you by default, the infrastructure, the security aspects. So I think those come naturally, and you only focus on the engineering aspects in larger organizations. I'm not saying that developers don't need to worry about security, but you don't need to worry about the infrastructure side of things to that extent, right? Moving to a CTO role at an early stage startup, I had to worry about pretty much everything, set up everything, and also don the product hat eventually. So that was one thing. Secondly, I think the role change, right? I used to always wonder when I got into the industry, what exactly these CVPs of engineering and the CTOs do.
Right.
You would be surprised that the role actually, especially the CTO role, actually is as much as an executive business role as it is an engineering role. So a lot of my time used to go into having conversations with business folk, which I already mentioned. A lot of time evaluating multiple SaaS offerings, right? A lot of times looking into the cost management side of things, right? What makes sense? Buy versus build conversations, right? And that was really important part of my role, where do you go to an existing SaaS offering versus building something in-house, right? Doing a lot of POCs. I think there are a lot of things which basically completely change from a developer to, say, a senior manager, director, or C-level executive role. One of my biggest change probably was uh, acting as a representative of the whole engineering organization, right? Rather than a specific part of engineering organization, not only internally, but externally. So I think you learn a lot, but you need to learn really quickly. You need to be at that particular role really fast. So my understanding is that every time your role or your career progression happens, there is a non-tech aspect which probably gets added unless you are going the IC role path, which is the staff engineers and the principal engineers of the world. By the way, there also people have this myth that they still do coding. A lot of mentoring, a lot of hand-holding of junior folks is involved there. It is as much as a people's role when say a manager, a senior manager role. The second aspect which comes along with having these management roles is basically the fact that you need to learn how to do stakeholder management really fast, right? Sitting alone and on your screen and building something versus being a representative for the whole organization or a team. The stakeholder management is just a next level thing which you need to handle. So a lot of these transitions basically happened for me, which was a great learning experience, to be honest. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Amazing. There is so much to unpack. I think we're going to have to invite you back on a future episode or another forum. But one final question, Varun. AI, it's everywhere. GPT-5 might be around the corner. Sam Altman has been dropping hints. And there's a lot of talk about GitHub Copilot and how AI is helping devs and ICs. What do you think? How do you think this plays out? How will engineering leadership look in the age of AI?
Sure. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that helping developers. I think AI, especially generative AI, is a great personal assistant, right? Can it replace programmers? I don't think yet, right? And I don't think in near future, right? There's a lot of talk about that. The code it generates, it isn't everything it generates, by the way. It's a great initial template to work on. So what you're doing is basically you're increasing the productivity by default, right? But to get great output, you need to get given great input. So you need to be see, garbage in is garbage out. As simple as that. So you need to be good developer or a great developer to ask the right questions. Simple prompt will give you simple answers, which will probably say code as code, not work. So that is I feel the development aspect, but for engineering leaders as well, I think engineering leaders should push for GitHub Copilot, to push for ChatGPT, not ChatGPT, at least the public one, the enterprise one, because of the IP issues.
Sure.
But companies should help, say, getting GitHub Copilot licenses for their developers for the simple reason. I think one of the things which makes developers great, and or I've seen as the common theme in great developers is not only they code well, they read a lot of code. They understand what other people are doing, what are the great patterns which other developers are using, say, from open source. Now, this knowledge has been learned by your personal assistant, and you're providing you information saying that how would you do this in this way? Because 80 out of 100 people probably do a database connection in this way, right? They use these design patterns, they use this factory pattern, they use that behavioral pattern or something else. So now you have a pair programmer who has this knowledge, which helps you to probably build code in much more structured way, right? Or in a more maintainable way. So engineering leaders need to push for that, because what you're doing is you're building a culture where people want to do or deliver a better, maintainable, scalable code. The second aspect, which I feel, and personally I have been using in my career since generative AI has come in, is to fast track a lot of manual things or reporting things. Simple example, in my current organization, we are not using any tool to get metrics. So how about getting metrics from GitHub and Jira and finding out few things? For example, I did an activity to find out how much time was PR taking, right, in general, and what was causing it was the secondary thing. But in general, how much time was general PR taking on an average, right? One way is to read the whole documentation and then implement it and then iterate over it. Second is GitHub Copilot knows about all of that documentation, quickly go through it. From my understanding or from my learning, around 15 years back, Excel was the life skill, or Microsoft Excel was something which made you special. Around 5 years back, Python suddenly became the thing which made you special, right? Moving forward, understanding how to use generative AI to you do your work will make you special, right? So being part of this journey and upskilling yourself to creatively use and be productive by using AI is really important. So that's my view. I'm really bullish on how generative AI will shape up, and I think it's going to become great AI assistant, whether you use tools like Notion, or you're doing GitHub Copilot for your coding, or in general managing your life as well. I think it's a great thing to have an assistant which has so much vast knowledge, which you can basically use and then apply your understanding over it and your experience over it to get the final product.
No, that's great. I think there you've given us a bunch of use cases to think about there.
That's all for today on the Engineering Success Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned for more.